Hello, Build Stuff. How many of you are here to learn that you can reprogram and rewire your brain? Just a couple. Everybody in this room should want to learn programming. This time, you are the algorithm. In order to do this talk, I want to take you through a couple of things. I'm one person out of millions of us in this industry. So I will tell parts of my story, but if you don't identify with me, and that's okay, I've got pieces of other people as well, and I bet you in the wonderful soup of stories that I will put together, you will identify with one of them. What we're going to do is go at this from perspective of an engineer, that's me, and not a psychologist. But I've done my research, and I just wanted to be very solution-based. Don't tell me I have a problem, point me at the documentation, and I'll fix myself. That's what I thought. That's what we do, right? There's a bug in our app. You are the app. So what do you do to fix this problem? There's got to be a way. We bend towards action in everything we do. So in order to start this off properly, I need to give probably a small introduction of who I am. Will you bear with me? Okay. My name is Heather Downing. I am known as Coraline because I picked a handle back in the days where you had handles and not names. And I'm known for doing .NET for about 12 years, lots of APIs, done lots of IoT, mobile, and voice applications. I also have done a lot of enterprise work, so I'm sure I'm not alone in that. From the time I was just an intern, I immediately got to work on a tax application for all 50 states. That was my introduction to the world, and I really haven't gone away from large-scale applications since. I'm also a speaker. I have a failed startup idea, which everybody should try at least once in their life. I also do horseback archery, and I'm in an area that actually does pretty well at it. So Lithuania, Poland, Hungary, massively great at it. I just decided to hop on board, and I have competed in the US. If you search down the Google rabbit hole, you might find a photo of me at what we call a Renaissance festival in the United States, with ears and all. I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, and I decided, because I like to sing, that I wanted to write songs in Elvish. But unfortunately, they always got in the way of all of my tech interviews, because every time they Googled me, it was just a bunch of Spotify hits and pictures of me at a Renaissance festival. So we spent 10 minutes of every interview explaining that that's not my full-time job. That was something I did on the weekends. I'm a semi-professional photographer. I used to get paid for it, don't anymore. So instead now I just like to take selfies, and I can show you how to take a really good one, even if you think you're not photogenic. But I'm a fake. Do you have any idea how uncomfortable it was for me to talk about myself like that? Ugh. What I've learned is if you are in this industry, you have a bend towards the next thing, learning. We often do not celebrate the steps that we've taken up the ladder. And not all of us, there are definitely folks that do, but they're not the majority. I feel like such a fake that I was having this conversation, not even an hour ago, with my husband, where I said, I don't feel qualified to give this talk right now because I'm currently going through clinical burnout, and I feel like I should have all of the answers before I talk about this. When I wrote this talk 5 or 6 years ago, I had emerged from a really bad bout of imposter syndrome, and I found things that worked for me. Throughout this talk, you'll find kind of different perspectives. But if you're not moving forward and growing, then maybe those things will work for a season. So what works to handle your insecurity at your mid-level developer stage might not work once someone asks you to be the CTO of a company. Now, you're dealing with different levels of pressure than you were before. It's still the same concept, but how you handle that might change, and that's good. That's an indication that you are trying things. So I'm going to lay out the problem for those of you who don't know what this is, because I, again, am coming at this from an engineer. So when I first started struggling with accepting that I'm a legitimate engineer, I decided to see who else was going through this and what the science said. About 70% of all people in the world, not just in our industry, has felt like an imposter at one time or another. But there are those of us who this issue persists for regularly. There is a difference between being humble about this, like Dylan alluded to, and having it cripple you and prevent you from rising to occasions, accepting opportunities, but also learning how to handle failures. I'm not good at it. I hope you all are great at it. I am terrible at handling massive failures because I think everything is always my fault. It's a problem with me as the algorithm and not that I was trying something I hadn't done before. See? Sometimes it's worse as you've been in the industry for a while. There's an expectation that you've done this for 12 years, Miss Downing. I'm assuming you know what you're doing. So there's more pressure because if I fail at that point, don't I take a reputational hit? Didn't I just prove somebody, some naysayer, right, that I wasn't cut out for a particular role because I didn't kill it and nail it all the time? What that does is that if once you do fail at something, it can embarrass but also shake you a little bit. The reason is because as you grow in this industry, you learn all the things you don't know, and you become very aware of where you are in that knowledge set, but you can't learn everything, which is why this is the percentage that we have here. So let's talk about the definition, and we're going to go with something really official from Wikipedia. Imposter syndrome can be defined as a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist even in the face of information that indicates the opposite is true. It is experienced internally as chronic self-doubt and feelings of intellectual fraudulence, which makes me sound like I should go to jail for this particular thing. So tell me, scientific community, if this is prevalent, how do we handle this? Because I would like to have a career in tech that doesn't terrify me. So how do we do this? Well, it looks like the earliest study I could find was actually done following a few women at Georgia State University. And that was back in 1978. So that's the earliest study they have done on imposter syndrome. And what they discovered is that women who, despite outstanding academic and professional accomplishments, persist in believing that they're not really bright and have fooled anyone who thinks otherwise. Because for imposters, success does not mean happiness. Now, did that hit a nerve? I feel relief if I succeed at something, but it's very temporary. Imposters often experience fear, stress, self-doubt, and feel uncomfortable with their achievements and talking about them. They also interfere with a person's ability to accept and enjoy their abilities and achievements, and it has a negative impact on their psychological well-being because when faced with an achievement-related task, imposters often experience uncontrollable anxiety due to the fear of failure. Burnout, emotional exhaustion, loss of intrinsic motivation, poor achievement, including guilt and shame about success, are reinforced by repetitions of the imposter cycle. This is the first time that a formalized study was done on this, and it was very surprising results. At first, I thought, well, maybe this is just a particular subset in a culture that is experiencing this. And while there's definitely some truth to that, there's always going to be a group of people who might tend to experience it more. Anybody can. So to help me explain what it might be like while you're being a developer, I made a lovely little flowchart for you. Don't judge my design skills. I don't need any more judgment. So it starts off with an achievement-related task, like, Heather, I want you to build a React app. That's great. I've never done React. I've done .NET all my life, but I can do it because I'm a senior developer, right? So it has to be done. There isn't anybody else to do it. Got to do it. Great. What ends up happening to me is I worry right away that I don't actually understand a whole lot about that ecosystem or how that's done, right? So I have two options here. Either I obsessively over-prepare in the weeks leading up to when I'm supposed to deliver, or I'm terrified to even look at it because it feels overwhelming. I procrastinate, okay? But let's say, because you are all awesome, and at that moment, I was able to pull it off. I was able to deliver on time exactly what was asked, which isn't that a dream? But let's say I do. And because I was honest with my management team about the fact that I hadn't done it before, they're impressed, right? Hey, you've never done this thing before, and you delivered it, great job. So when they give me those accolades, I have a temporary feeling of relief, like, oh God, I'm not going to get fired today. This is a good day. But depending on how I approach the problem, I will either attribute that success to effort or luck based on that. And because if I say, oh, it was just anybody could have figured this out if they just didn't sleep for 2 weeks, and just put in obscene amounts of effort, or I don't know, I just stumbled on something, anybody could have stumbled on it. The moment I discount that positive feedback, that means it increases my self-doubt. It can lead to depression, anxiety about, what if I have to do it again? What if now they trust me with this thing, which means they're going to give me something that's even more mission critical? What if they give me a security piece? What if they give me something that cannot miss a deadline? What if I delivered this, but I can't deliver the next one? And suddenly, I have existential dread about something that I love to do, which is programming. And that just sets me up for the next achievement-related task that's on my plate and just puts me in a loop. This is the imposter cycle, as told by a software engineer. That's what it's like for a good amount of us, is that we can't even stop to really say, yes, I did this thing. I feel more confidence. It isn't always that way. And this, to be very clear, is actually a big deal. There might be somebody in the audience that is listening going, that's your problem. Like, just get over it. You did it. Good job. Why are we even talking about this? So, intelligent people are always doubtful because they start really looking at the stakes, what's possible. They also are incredibly aware of their human nature. We need people like that on our engineering teams, leading a project, starting a business. We need this level. And it happens more to people who are high achievers than people who are not. So the more successful you get, the more likely you are to share a stage at some point with names that inspire you, and you ask yourself, what the heck am I doing up here? Or leading something, delivering something, when you have never done that before. And you keep getting asked more and more because guess what? You're darn capable, and that's why you keep getting trusted with this stuff, and you feel that weight. But I'd like to point out that feelings are not facts, okay? I have to tell myself this quite often. If you have the opposite problem, then you might not be accomplishing much, but the moment you do anything microscopic, you tell everybody, oh, I am the best at this. And I'm the best at that. That is the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm a big Disney watcher, so I used to call this the Gaston effect from Beauty and the Beast, who would sing about themselves really loudly, very obnoxious. The problem with that is that they're unteachable because they feel like they already know everything about architecture. You can't show them anything any differently. That is the opposite scale of this, and that is its own problem. But just know your goal is to not to get to there. There is a wonderful reality in between where you can have humility and you can still be encouraged and have confidence to continue forward in your career. I'm sure you're asking yourself this question, or maybe you do know the answer is no, but you're listening because you have a colleague or a direct report that you know struggles like this. So the questions you should ask are, if you often feel like a fake, or you attribute your success to luck, or you discount your level of success when you reflect, probably yes. Now, little disclaimer, I'm not a psychologist, and if you really want to, you can go to one about this. The good news is, this is not an actual medical situation. This is a mindset, okay? So we're going to help reprogram some of that stuff that's in your head. And there's just little bits and pieces you can do. So, who is affected by this? Remember I mentioned that even though that early study in 1978 was done on successful women, Amy Cuddy has this excellent TED Talk that talks about achievement, and then at the end of her talk, she constantly had men come up to her. So about half the crowd were men as well. I feel right now, this is incredibly important to understand that you are not unique in this, you are not alone in this, and it is very competitive right now to be in tech. So it's easy to take yourself out of the running in a job interview or for a project that seems really important because you don't want to fail it. So who has this among credible people that we know? I have several quotes I'm going to take for you so that it's in their words and not mine. Dr. Margaret Chan was a leader of the World Health Organization, just a little organization there. And when you are involved in medical science, there is a lot that gets revealed to you that you are suddenly aware you know very little about. We've gone through several of that over the past years, right? Even Albert Einstein felt that the esteem he was held to was very exaggerated. I don't know if I would call him an involuntary swindler, though. There were definitely a lot of things that he did bring to the table that were amazing. And maybe he's just aware that there was competitive people out there that were also researching the same kinds of things. Of course, there are celebrities, if you look into this at all, that might come up. Mike Myers is one of my favorite comedians at the time. And I love that he says at any time he still expects that the no-talent police will come and arrest him. Ricky Gervais is also another great one. But this is my favorite quote probably from the deck. The best advice I've ever received is no one else knows what they are doing either. And that is, if you search inside yourself, that's really true. We're not asking you to memorize lines of code, years of code. Sometimes interviews make us feel like that. What we're asking you to be is a detective and figure out the solution to a problem that is being presented to you. You're not supposed to have the answers up front. You're supposed to just be open and creative and thoughtful and collaborative, and that's what makes you great at being an engineer. Will Smith said that he still doubts himself every day because what people believe is his self-confidence is actually his reaction to fear. There's a story about him once that I love sharing, is that when he first got cast as the lead role in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, he was very new to Hollywood, and he felt the pressure of having a lead role. in a brand new show. And he had so much anxiety and nervousness built up that he would play pranks mercilessly on everybody who worked behind the scenes, putting whoopee cushions out, painting door handles. Like, it was ridiculous, right? And they just thought, oh, he's just being a jokester. But that is how he just dealt with all his nervous energy. There are some authors that I follow that also touch on this. If you find yourself asking yourself and your friends, am I really a writer or an engineer? Am I really an artist? Chances are that you are. The counterfeit innovator is wildly self-confident, and the real one is scared to death. This is a line from The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And that book really inspired me to handle when you can't come up with a really good solution or a good idea, especially if you were coming up with some original content, for example, on a YouTube channel, a Twitch stream, it can be hard to handle some of that writer's block. The War of Art addresses the mindset for that, and I found it really helpful also for programming. Neil Gaiman is a very famous guy as well. And the reason I like this quote is that this unshakable thing that I'm definitely getting away with something, I have that. And I feel like it ebbs and flows. Sometimes I'm like, nah, I'm good. I think I've figured this out. And then something else will present as a new challenge that will make me feel like, oh, but what if I fail at this? Even though I am capable of figuring it out, what if I fail at this? Maya Angelou has written 11 books, and each time she thinks that she's going to be found out and has run a game of everybody. So there's a couple of names in tech that also have spoken about this. When Sheryl Sandberg was at Facebook, now Meta, she was trusted to be the COO. That was a pretty big job. And I can't imagine being a C-suite of any level is easy because you're constantly being challenged and questioned. Richard Campbell has made a lot of mistakes, he says, but most intelligence comes from failure. Yes, something I totally agree with. I don't think you can say, if you've never really made big mistakes, like good mistakes, if you thoroughly understand the solution. Because sometimes if you just come upon the right answer on a blog or in the documentation because it just gives it to you, do you know what's possible to happen if you didn't follow it? Do you know what the stakes are to do it wrong? And if you do, then maybe you can also see the creativity between the success and the failure. Sometimes you learn much more because you've had to dig than if you just accept this right answer from Stack Overflow. You see? I feel like a phony sometimes. Sometimes I joke, hey, it's a good day, my badge still works. Or I answer, how are you with, well, I'm still working. And nowadays, that's a really good response. So is this a healthy concern or illogical doubt? And for that, I'm going to reach into C.S. Lewis. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. That's kind of hard for human beings. There is a difference between being insecure about everything and just humble. There is a wonderful TED Talk by Mark Rober, and he talks about how to change the way that we present learning to kids. And they did an experiment looking at the way that they presented a problem to kids and said, okay, if you get this right, you get a reward. And then another group, they said, hey, if you get this wrong, you get taken out of the group. See? So there's two very different ways to approach it. Another group wasn't given any pros or cons, just saying, hey, here's something to solve. Which one do you think had the least amount of pressure? Group 1, 2, or 3? Exactly, 3. Because when you are just presented with play, hey, just play around with this. Using those words as a tech lead is very powerful. Hey, do you want to just play around with learning React? And let me know when you feel like you have learned something from it, even if it's small, and don't give them a deadline. Ask about it on your next one-on-one. Have you looked into anything? And what do you find about it compared to what you used to do? It becomes conversational, collaborative. It becomes about the curiosity and the discovery. And see, now you're putting us back where we belong, which is being the detective and not the one on trial for not delivering exactly what you need all the time. Because when we don't feel the pressure, we get to explore. There isn't expectation. And for someone like me, that takes all the pressure away. I know what you're thinking, but we do have deadlines, Heather. This isn't college. This is not university. We have to deliver something now. We get paid money, and I got a family. How do we do this? This is the moment where you have to know yourself enough to teach your manager how you need to be managed and explain, I need to be given opportunities to look into things earlier than what you're currently giving me. Like, bring me in right when a product owner is talking about what they need from a tech team. And so I can start thinking about it. And it doesn't feel intimidating by you just calling me in and giving me a bunch of Jira tickets, that already have dates assigned to them. That's not collaborative. And I know that's hard, especially if you're in a company that is like, this is how we do things. Well, ask to have it be done differently so you can bring your best self. And I haven't met a whole lot of managers who originally were programmers that know how to manage. So most times, there's a lot of gratitude. Oh, sure, I never thought of that because, my company didn't pay for me to go to management school. So thanks. And then things get better for both of you. So is this detrimental to your career? This is where I bring in my story. When I had become a newly minted senior developer, I know because I got to update my LinkedIn profile with that title. I was very excited, and I worked for a company that did a lot of things where deadlines cannot move. And I was presented with a mission-critical item that needed to be done. And I was very eager to prove myself because I'm a senior now, right? So I was given this thing I'd never done before. I'm not embarrassed to say it was security because I now have many years of security under my belt, but at the time I had none. And I just decided to take the procrastination route because I was really overwhelmed and concerned that I was definitely going to bite off the wrong pathway, okay? So I procrastinated about it. And when it came time to check in with everybody on how those PRs were going, my manager followed up with me a couple of days before this stuff needed to go live. And there was intrinsic trust because I was a senior developer. Of course I was working on it. So when it came time for that conversation, he came in and said, hey, I just want to see how you're doing, how you're thinking all the pieces are going to fit in. I said, sure. Quick question. Do you know what this thing does and what that error is? And he stops and he looks at it. And he said, there's only 3 lines of code here, Heather. I said, right. I was just doing a proof of concept and trying to figure out what this is. And he said, I wish you had said something to me sooner. I said, I'm sure I could figure it out. He said, let me just call the rest of the team in. So we called the rest of the team in, okay? And all of us tried to come up with a solution that could be delivered in 48 hours. And of course, we could not come up with a production-ready situation in 48 hours. And unfortunately, that client needed that delivery because it was something that is the same date every year and cannot move. So we lost that client, which is a really big financial peace for this company, so I got fired. And before you all start defending me in this moment, remember, I did not communicate that I was struggling, that I had never done that before, and I just didn't want to share how unprepared I felt because I wanted to prove something. And what I did is I drug the rest of the team down with me. Nobody got their bonuses that year. No, I mean, they had to make really hard decisions about staffing. And you're thinking, well, if everything hinges on whether Heather gives a PR, that's a really bad company. But the point is that yes, the company could have done different things for me, but I could have also done different things for me. I'm going to own that this was absolutely detrimental to my career, because once that happens, like, I didn't make that mistake as a junior. I made that mistake as somebody who had been in the field for years, okay? But I was just frozen by the fear. I couldn't get over the fact that I felt like overwhelmed by how much I didn't know about security. And fear can utterly dominate our behavior. It stops us thinking, helping, learning, discovering, and doing all the things we need in abundance. Fear is the mind killer. I hate it because it is something that is hard to explain to someone else who is just not afraid. Why are we afraid of something like this? It's not like we jump off of buildings for a living. We're just sitting with our laptops. Because we feel the pressure and the stakes feel so high. And do you know why that is? We are very expensive. And companies want to push us very hard to get their money's worth. They are not motivated to make us feel better. We have to have our own boundaries, and we have to know how to communicate what we need so we can give them what they need. So that way, both of you win. If you don't know how to communicate that, let that be the next thing that you think about and you put together. So what is the meaning of fake it till you make it? I get told that a lot, and I don't like it. A better way to think of it is faking it until you become it. Amy Cuddy is the one that coined that phrase. Because you're not really making it, but you're still a fake. You are making it because eventually you did figure out how to do that implementation. And now you are someone who knows how to do security. You are someone who knows how to do gRPC. So you become that. You don't make it. It's just that you are in a different place in that journey than someone else. And there's no way that you can be a senior developer, an architect of all kinds of architecture, of every programming language and framework out there. It's just not possible. That means when you do a paradigm shift and suddenly you have to learn a lot about Python because AI is a thing now, you get to learn at the bottom again. So if there's anything that I would tell a budding person who's really interested in coming into programming, I would ask them, are you okay with being wrong? Are you okay with constantly being a student? Because that is what you're signing up for. Because tech will move faster than any of your memory banks can move. You will pick something that you really like, but maybe the rest of the industry is shifting. Every one of us is in various stages of not knowing what we are doing. So how do you convert this curiosity into confidence? Now we're going to talk a little bit about how to interpret it differently. You have to know what you lack and then find a mentor who does know. And it's hard to be a stranger and then come up to someone you don't know and say, hi, you know a whole lot about this database stuff. Can you just mentor me freely with no money and spend all your time with me? That's a lot to ask. Also, most of us are terrible teachers. So what do I mean by mentoring? Meaning it's okay if it's not somebody who's sitting next to you. You can also follow somebody who puts out content that is an expert about this, and you can start absorbing a little bit of their mindset while still always questioning it. And that's what I mean by that mentorship. It's great if you can get it at your work, but don't expect that it may happen that way. You should interpret that fear signal as excitement. So now, when I get asked, are you nervous about going up on stage? I say, nope, I'm really excited. And I smile. Do you know why I smile? Because if you smile, it sends subliminal messages to your brain that you're happy. And then you get this wonderful little tiny microdose of dopamine. I'm here for the science, let's do it. Before I talk, I go behind a stage and I put my arms up because some scientist on a TED Talk said that it works. And I'm like, that doesn't work. Totally works. Gets the blood flowing. I'm like, oh yeah, I feel like Superman now. Let's do this. It's good to know what you don't know, but don't compare yourself to other people. It's hard because right now you can be really inspired by all the information that you got at this conference and at the same time feel dread because that's a lot of information now that you have to put in your head and also produce, right? It's an interesting place to be, to have this kind of a mindset. But they are just feelings and not facts. They're just a feeling. And feelings are allowed to pass you by, and you don't have to absorb it. That's hard for me. I'm very empathic. I feel everybody in this room. I'm not weird like that. I'm like in your head or something. But I feel your energy, and that is pretty normal for speakers on stage. I'm so sensitive to rooms that when I get no reaction, I go, well, I'm not helping anybody, so I guess it doesn't really matter what I say. But that's because there's a closeness inside of the person watching that is trying to protect how they feel. And that's okay. We are all culturally raised differently, and only you can decide if the feelings you're having are normal or if you should have somebody who's much more well-versed in psychology than this girl to help you out. Because the story you're telling yourself about your competence or incompetence is all invented. Or you could say, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. Just like what happened to me, right? I thought, there's no way I'm going to get this implementation done. So I didn't get the implementation done. See? I manifested my reality, but not a reality I wanted. Be careful how you are thinking about things. Your thoughts and your words matter. So is it possible to overcome this with the 7 or 8 minutes we got left? I think so. So if I'm not thinking the correct way, or that's helpful to me, I wanted to know who is not suffering from this and how do they solve a problem when they're presented with failures or things that include self-doubt. So I went to 4 people that I basically thought had their life together, and I said, hey, I have questions. So I asked my friend Karen, what do you do when you've had to deliver something you've never done before? And of course, she agreed, get with someone who does know. And don't be afraid to say that. Saying that I haven't done something before is not a statement of weakness, although you think it is. It is a statement of reality, because whether you say it or not, it's true. So I think it's better not to lie to your team, right? Brad suggests to ask for appropriate discovery time and then pad your estimates a lot. I think right now the going rate is 3 times as long as you think. Is that correct? About 3 times? Yeah. Heather suggests to be transparent so you don't offer to reach a bar that you can't reach quickly. And Preston said, try not to make commitments to set yourself up for failure, which is about the same. So then I asked, what was your most memorable mistake that led to growth? Because, these are the people who have their lives together. Do they make mistakes? I mean, how do they handle that disappointment? Karen's, unfortunately, released a bug into production that she didn't catch. Brad accidentally deleted years' worth of database records. Heather thought she could do everything on a project herself and failed. A lot of Heathers have a problem with that. And not paying attention to signs of an unrecoverable situation with a team member got him really burned because he just didn't pay attention. Now remember, these are people who don't have imposter syndrome. These are people who are, I would consider, healthy in their confidence. So then, when you have this failure, what keeps you going? Because I find overcoming it the hardest part. Even if you fail, things still need to get done. Karen is very pragmatic, and I appreciate that about her. Brad is much more lackadaisical about it because everything you do is a tiny drop in the bucket of life. And Heather's just a very stubborn person, so she didn't want to quit because she constantly has something to prove. So why give up now? You just put all that effort in, why let the effort go to waste long term? Failing at something does not mean that you are a failure was great to hear from someone like Preston. So then I went up the ladder, away from the colleague level, and I asked manager and like a CEO level, CTO level people some questions. So what do you think about this stuff? What advice do you have? Do everything to become the expert, even if you don't feel like you're going to reach it, and just let it drive you and enjoy that journey. Because you have to have a level of fearlessness to do what you do. Realize that people want you to succeed. I was told that people are going to give you 45 minutes of their life, Heather. They'd like you to succeed at this talk. Yes? Because I'm stealing 45 minutes of your life away. Otherwise. There's a fine line between humility and lack of confidence and pride, right? Because if you think it's luck, you will not be able to repeat the success. So how can you tell if someone who fails has the potential to ultimately succeed instead of it just not being their thing and they shouldn't be in programming? I appreciate that John would say that nobody is useless. Just own up to your failed attempts, but actively demonstrated that you learned from it and what you did. You have to have the ability to visualize your success, which sounds very fluffy, but if I can't imagine what it's like to be good at something, how am I supposed to reach that? You can't remain frozen by failure. If you would like a very practical guide for the pieces and the holes of your knowledge that you don't have, there's a great digital book by a friend of mine named Rob Connery called The Imposter's Handbook. And it teaches you everything from big O notation to other pieces that you might have missed at boot camp or haven't learned in a while from university. Highly recommend it. I used to have this hanging up in my office, and I constantly repeat it to myself now. Just be scared of not finding what is true. And if what is true that you don't know something yet, you can fix that. You have to also realize that you can fix your mindset as well. So, how do you do something like this in a team situation? So you need to shift your focus and team up with a friend or a partner at work that can talk up your skills a little bit and remind you of the achievements you've done. This is called co-bragging, and it works because if you give encouragement, then they will also give you encouragement, and then that cycle will repeat. And you will point out the things that you have historically done because people with imposter syndrome have terrible memories about their successes. And of course, be kind to yourself. This is a really big one. You were the only one that acted on these opportunities. You did it. You're not an imposter for trying something that might not work. You're totally the hero for trying it at all. It's brave to try this out. So, let's go through those again. Discover how to be self-aware and recognize that these emotions are different from the facts of the situation. You have to update your view of failure as an intense growth opportunity. And fake it until you become it and make sure you pay it forward for others and be the first one to point out, even if it's just weekly. Daily is great too. I really like the way that you wrote the comments in that pull request. I really appreciated how you collaborated with me on this or that. As soon as you start the ball rolling, it becomes a cultural thing that you can put into the team you're on. Without permission, you just start doing it. Because you don't have to attain perfection or mastery to be worthy of the success that you have achieved. My friends, you are here at Build Stuff, you're in the top 5% of developers in my book because you're actively trying to learn. And I think you've been successful today in doing that. Stay curious.